up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon. On the second anniversary of President Park Geun-hye taking office, experts say the president should improve her leadership style to bring about some tangible economic results. A North Korea expert based in the U.S. says Pyongyang has the capability to build as many as 100 nuclear weapons by the year 2020. Plus, eurozone finance ministers approved Greece's plan to extend its bailout by 4 months. Now, despite the deal, the governor of Korea's central bank says uncertainty is still lingering in the market. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, February 25th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. 2 years ago today, President Park Geun-hye was inaugurated into office. Her second year as president has certainly been a turbulent one, from a ferry disaster, personnel failures, and a document leak scandal to a tax policy controversy.
Now, President Park herself has said this year will be a golden time for her economic and reform initiatives to produce tangible results. But experts point out that she will have to do more to earn parliamentary and public support. Choo-sun has this report.
President Park Geun-hye began her second year in office, vowing to breathe new life into the domestic economy and improve inter-Korean ties to prepare for unification. But everything came to a standstill when the Seoul ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast on April 16th, claiming the lives of more than 300 people. The government's lax response came under fire, and President Park vowed to strengthen disaster management and revamp her administration. But her personnel selection and insufficient communication were criticized, with 2 of her prime minister nominees being forced to withdraw amid controversies. A document leaked from the presidential office late last year and a controversial tax policy revision caused the president's approval rating to drop to an all-time low of 29%. Responding to public criticism, President Park has carried out a reshuffle and is expected to name her new chief of staff.
The question is whether the new chief of staff can mediate between the president, the political parties, and the people, while at the same time helping the president.
No expert seems to question the president's commitment to the country or her determination to improve the quality of living in Korea. They say for the Park administration to make progress, she needs to change her leadership style, give more authority to her cabinet, improve communication with the political parties and the public to promote the objectives of her reform policies, such as health insurance and public pension.
What's more important is for Parliament to lead discussions with the government and civic groups and set the framework for an outcome on the issues. If the presidential office takes the driver's seat, it will face a great backlash.
Political observers are unanimous in saying that now is the golden time for the president to better communicate to produce the desired results in her economic and reform drive. Choi-Yu-sun, Arirang News.
A renowned U.S. expert on North Korea says the regime's stockpile of nuclear weapons could expand by tenfold by the year 2020. And even as it stands now, an American think tank says North Korea's missile, nuclear, and cyber warfare capabilities might pose a real threat not only to South Korea, but also the United States. Kim Min-ji has the details.
North Korea could potentially expand its nuclear stockpile to 100 weapons over the next 5 years. This, according to Joel Witt, senior fellow at the U.S.-Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University, who says Pyongyang is currently believed to possess between 10 to 16 nuclear weapons. He gives 3 possible scenarios for the North's nuclear expansion, with Pyongyang forecast to double its stockpile at minimal growth, up to 50 at moderate growth, which presumes the nation's nuclear and missile programs continue to develop at the current pace, and in the worst case, a tenfold increase from now. The expert also called on the South Korean government to give up its unrealistic fantasy of unification and focus on reality, stressing that North Korea is a country that will soon have between 50 to 100 nuclear weapons. And such developments pose a serious threat not only to the Korean peninsula, but also to the United States. U.S.-based think tank the Heritage Foundation says the North likely possesses the ability to place nuclear weapons on its medium-range missiles, as well as the technology to miniaturize warheads. Saying that Pyongyang has an extensive ballistic missile force, the think tank added the country has deployed about 800 Scud short-range missiles, 300 Nodong medium-range missiles, and 50 Musudan intermediate-range ballistic missiles. It goes on to say that the North continues to develop ICBMs, some capable of hitting the United States. The think tank also noted that North Korea has deployed 70% of its ground forces within 140 kilometers of the demilitarized zone, making it possible to attack South Korea with little or no warning. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's top nuclear negotiator has revealed that the members of the six-party talks want to work towards slowly bringing back North Korea back to the multilateral discussions on the regime's denuclearization. Now, this includes inviting North Korean officials to a round of pre-talks, but it remains to be seen whether Pyongyang would be interested. Hwang Seung-hee reports.
South Korea, the United States, China, Japan, and Russia have agreed on the need to hold exploratory talks prior to restarting the long-stalled six-party nuclear dialogue. Wrapping up a meeting with his Russian counterpart Morgulov Igor in Moscow on Tuesday, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk said the five parties reached such consensus through a series of meetings over the past few weeks. The South Korean envoy said officials discussed when and where the exploratory talks should take place and added that six-way dialogue involving North Korea is also being taken into account. The prelude meeting will allow the six nations to meet with no strings attached and to test North Korea's sincerity about denuclearization before formally resuming the six-party talks, which haven't been held since late 2008. Seoul and Washington have stressed that Pyongyang first take the necessary steps to end its nuclear program, while China, Russia, and North Korea want to reopen the talks without preconditions. But whether Pyongyang will accept the invitation remains in doubt. The regime has been raising military tensions on the Korean peninsula in protest of the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington that kick off next week. Hwang Seung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Assembly kicked off a three-day interpellation session on government affairs on this Wednesday. The first day will focus on political, diplomatic and security issues. And 7 government ministers, including foreign, unification, justice and defence, will answer questions raised by a dozen lawmakers from both the ruling and main opposition parties. Questions will also be directed to Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu, who was confirmed just last week. The questions are likely to touch on a range of issues, from a possible lifting of sanctions on North Korea and a constitutional revision proposal to recent changes to the tax code and proposals to reform the pension system. These sessions on the next 2 days will focus on economic, social and cultural affairs. Now, in a very unusual case for Korea, 3 people have been killed after a man in his 50s opened fire with a shotgun in the central city of Sejong this Wednesday morning. The gunman, identified by his family name Kang, was also found dead in an apparent suicide in a nearby city a couple of hours after the shooting. The exact motive for the shooting remains unclear, but 2 of the victims are family members of the shooter's ex-lover. The 3rd victim was his ex-lover's current boyfriend. Police say Kang took 2 guns which were being held at a city police patrol division, and both were found near the location of where he died. Gun possession is illegal in Korea unless approved by the government.
Greece has some breathing room to get its financial house in order after eurozone finance ministers on Tuesday approved its reform plans, triggering a 4-month extension of its bailout. Now, the head of Korea's central bank has welcomed the development, but says there's still a long road ahead. Hwang Jie reports.
Greece brushed off a major uncertainty to receiving a bailout extension on Tuesday. Its European creditors approved a reform proposal and extended the loan program by 4 more months. The key creditors involving the European Commission, European Central Bank, and International Monetary Fund thought the list of reforms was serious enough, but warned that it's only a starting point.
This list is just an indication of the kind of reforms that they would like to push, like to replace, and also the ones that they would like to continue. And it's going to take time to really get into the details and to design a new contract or agreement which will carry us on for 4 months.
Greece's reform plan includes measures to tackle tax evasion, corruption, and reviewing public spending at every level. The extension now has to be approved by some lawmakers in several countries, including Germany, before midnight this Saturday. That is when the current bailout agreement is set to expire. On Greece's approval, Korea's central bank governor Eoh Jin-joo said it was good news for the global financial market. He added, though, that uncertainty still lies ahead and it's too early to be overly optimistic. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
South Korea and China have inched closer to implementing their bilateral free trade deals. Seoul's trade ministry said the two sides exchanged provisional agreements this morning, 3 months after concluding negotiations in November last year. Tariffs will be lifted on over 90% of all imported goods from both sides within 20 years of the FTA taking effect. Now, one notable thing is that compared to other free trade deals, this FTA will see the largest number of Korean goods enjoying preferential tariffs, as it will include products manufactured at the Inter-Korean Joint Industrial Complex in Kaesong. South Korea and China hope to finalize the formal signing within the first half of this year, and it needs to be ratified by both parliaments before it takes effect.
Korea's consumer sentiment improved for the second straight month in February, but the improvement does not necessarily point to a strong recovery momentum. The Bank of Korea says its consumer sentiment index came in at 103 this month, up a single point from the previous month. The figure is lower than the level recorded last May, when consumer confidence was hit hard by the Seoul ferry disaster. Still, a reading above 100 does mean that optimists outnumber pessimists. The monthly index reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions, and also their future spending plans. Now, the prolonged economic recession is prompting Koreans to crack open their piggy banks and use the loose change in their pockets. The Bank of Korea says the collection rate for coins stood at over 22% last year, rising to $548 million US. That's the highest collection rate recorded since the 2008 global financial crisis. Now, this rate is worked out by comparing the amount of coins that come back to the amount issued. Meanwhile, the central bank slashed its economic growth outlook for this year to 3.4%, citing sluggish domestic consumption and negative growth in the manufacturing sector.
There's less than a week to go until the Mobile World Congress 2015 opens in Barcelona, Spain. Now, if last year was about introducing fifth-generation technologies, which is about 1,000 times faster than the current LTE generation, this year's MWC will focus on how these 5G technologies can be applied to Internet of Things and thus create synergy. Global telecom service providers will be showing how all objects in our everyday lives could be connected through 5G technologies. Korea's SK Telecom and KT will also take part, showing the future with 5G-themed life innovation by 5G. Korean service providers aim to commercialize 5G technologies by 2020. Now, is adultery constitutional or unconstitutional? Well, the question will be answered on Thursday. That's tomorrow here in Korea. Now, this is the fifth time the issue has been brought before Korea's constitutional court since 1990. And last time in 2008, the court maintained its position that under the Constitution, extramarital affairs are illegal. Our Sun Jang-in tells us more.
Back in 2008, Korean actress Ok Sori filed a petition with the Constitutional Court challenging the application of criminal law to adultery. She had been sued by her husband for having an affair. She challenged the constitutionality of the law by arguing that a person should have the right to choose the person who they want to love. But the court rejected the appeal, and after an ugly battle with her now ex-husband, a local court sentenced her to 8 months in prison. 7 years has passed, but the debate on whether adultery is constitutional or not is still a hot potato. The law is undergoing review once again, and the court is to make its ruling on Thursday. 4 similar cases have been brought to the court since 1990, but each time the law was ruled constitutional. However, the latest request by Ok in 2008 was short of 1 vote to overturn the statute, with a number of judges ruling the law unconstitutional, surpassing those who didn't for the first time. 6 of 9 justices must agree for a ruling. Adultery has been seen as a criminal offense in Korea for over 60 years. It remains to be seen whether the criminality of what many see as a private matter will be overturned in the context of a modern democracy in Thursday's ruling. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Korea has confirmed its first ever case of the human-to-human transmission of a deadly tick-borne virus that claimed 10 lives last year here in Korea. This worrying new development is raising concerns of a possible epidemic. Kwon So-ah reports.
A bite from this 2 to 3 millimeter sized tick could be fatal. So far, the tick-borne virus, or thrombocytopenia syndrome, was only known to infect people through a direct bite. But now, for the first time in Korea, it has been confirmed that person-to-person infection is possible. Sanitation and health authorities said Wednesday that 4 people contracted the virus from a 68-year-old patient who had been infected through a tick bite last year. It's believed the virus was passed on to them as they conducted CPR on her. The patient died a day after she was admitted to hospital. The medical staff showed symptoms of the virus, such as fever and muscle pain, but went on to make full recoveries. The case is raising alarm bells inside and outside of Korea, especially as it comes at a time when epidemics are causing fear across the world, with the deadly Ebola virus still not contained. There are also questions about why the cases were only confirmed nearly half a year after the medical staff had shown clear symptoms of the virus. Experts say the SFTS virus could be contagious through the respiratory system, blood, or other secretions, and have raised concerns this virus could become a much bigger problem in Korea. Globally, this is not the first time person-to-person infection has been recorded. China reported 5 similar cases between 2012 and 2013. In recent years, health authorities in Korea have advised people to wear long sleeves and pants when going to grassy areas, especially during the warmer seasons. Last year, out of the 24 people who contracted the virus, 10 died. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the rest of the global headlines. We're following this Wednesday lunchtime from Seoul. For that, we connect to Eunice Kim, standing by the news centre for us.
Now, Eunice, a mother's worst nightmare come true. Police in London now say they have reason to believe the 3 British schoolgirls who left for Turkey last week have, in fact, crossed into Syria to join the Islamic State group.
That's right, Jin-joo. The school friends are believed to have been lured in via social media such as Twitter and Facebook. This development comes despite an emotional public plea by shocked family members and a frantic effort by both British and Turkish authorities to keep the teens away. Lee Ji-yoon has the story.
The 3 British teenage girls that boarded a flight to Istanbul last week are now believed to be in Syria. London's Metropolitan Police said Tuesday that it has enough reasons to believe the 2 15-year-olds and 1 16-year-old have made it to Syria, presumably to join the so-called Islamic State militant group. With reports that at least one of the girls contacted an IS recruiter in Syria via social media before leaving London, British authorities have been working closely with Turkey over the past week to try to find the girls before they could enter Syria. However, with this latest news, it seems that their efforts have fallen short. Turkey's deputy prime minister criticized British authorities for notifying Turkey about the missing girls too late, 3 days after they disappeared, saying the girls arrived in Istanbul as tourists. The Metropolitan Police disputes that account, saying it notified the Turkish embassy in London a day after the teens went missing. Security officials say so far at least 500 British nationals have traveled to join the militants in Syria, often via Turkey. While continuing to lure in young people to join the terrorist group, Islamic State militants have also abducted at least 150 Assyrian Christians in northeastern Syria. Syrian Christian activists said Tuesday that the militants raided their homes, kidnapping people, including children, women, and the elderly. Earlier, the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the militants abducted 90 people from villages inhabited by the ancient Christian minority. 이지훈, Arirang News.
U.S. markets closed on a new high note at the end of the trading day Tuesday, buoyed by positive news out of Greece on its bailout program extension and on indications that interest rates will not change anytime soon. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P 500 both beat Friday's record close, ending 0.5% and 0.3% up, respectively. The tech-heavy Nasdaq came just 1.6% shy of the record close cemented back in March of 2000. The rally came after U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen told a Senate Banking Committee in her semi-annual testimony that the central bank will remain patient on raising the near-zero key interest rate. She said the Fed will consider hikes on a meeting-by-meeting basis, though it was unlikely for at least the next couple meetings, an indication traders took to mean no increase until the fall. Train cars thrown off its tracks in Southern California. A commuter train collided with a tractor-trailer just before 6 early Tuesday morning local time, leaving 3 carriages derailed and 28 people hospitalized, 4 of them critically. Oxnard police said the conductor was able to initiate an emergency braking system before hitting the truck. The 54-year-old driver, who had gotten his vehicle stuck on the tracks, was arrested on suspicion of a felony hit and run. The train was on its way to Los Angeles from Ventura County, about 100 kilometers northwest of the metropolis.
Good afternoon, I'm Lee Ji-yeon here with your latest weather updates. Now, the peninsula is covered by patches of clouds, but it will get cloudier as the day moves along, and it will be a rainy day in some parts. The rain will start on Jeju Island this afternoon, and the central parts of the peninsula, including here in Seoul, will also see a light rain that could be mixed with snow after 9 p.m. tonight. So until then, a dry and mild day is ahead of us today. The high in Seoul will later peak at 9, and that's a couple of degrees higher than yesterday, feeling more like early spring this afternoon. So with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for other parts of the country. The top temperatures in Daegu and Busan will rise to 11, and Gwangju will peak at 10 this afternoon. And as for the other areas, Jeju Island and Daejeon should both peak at 10, and Dokdo rises to 7. Now, the rain tonight will bring temperatures down quite a bit, and on Friday we'll have a freezing morning low of -6 here in Seoul. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that brings us to the end of this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon.
Yes, Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time on Thursday. So until then, goodbye.